Bom dia, boa tarde, boa noite, or whatever the case may be. My name is Marcus, and I am the host of the Black Brazil Today YouTube channel, as well as the blackbraziltoday.com blog, where I analyze Brazil from the perspective of race. So tonight, this video that I'm recording definitely fits into that category of analyzing Brazil from the perspective of race. Now, I came across this story just like a few days ago. And as oftentimes, I get so much news out of Brazil that, I can't react to everything because it's too much. I would need several channels to, discuss all of the news that comes out of Brazil, even if I'm just talking about, social issues or specifically race issues or whatever. There's no way one person can handle all of these stories. So oftentimes I'll sit back and wait for more information about a particular story that catches my eye to develop or to come out before I react to it. I'll check and see, okay, is this going to be a big story? Is this just a story that will be good just to analyze from the perspective of race? And I'll just sit back to see what's going to happen. And so it's today. Today is Wednesday evening, almost Thursday morning. So as I said, I think I might have heard about this story 2 or 3 days ago. And looking at the commentary, and I've been seeing people posting reactions on TikTok. And I says, okay, I definitely need to talk about this story. This has to do with what people defined some years ago as what's called blackfishing. A phenomenon where people who are not black, or specifically white people, who particularly women, they take on certain attributes that are associated with being black, whether they may do something with their skin color, they may do something with their hair, they may use makeup to, deceive someone into thinking that they're actually black. This is what, people identified as blackfishing some years ago. So this is something that actually was covered in Brazil some years ago. This is a story that I did. What's the date on this article? It might be 2019. Are white Brazilian women blackfishing? What's the deal with them suddenly rocking braids, kinky hair, and African face paint? So this was, I went and tried to search for the original article, but I couldn't find it. So, this is always a good thing when an article that in the original Portuguese is not up anymore, but I still have a copy of it on my own, blog translated into English. So this is what people, Afro-Brazilian activists were talking about just a couple of years ago. All these years, blackness has always been something that people wanted to avoid. And a lot of people, I remember some years ago, I always discuss this movie, Bamboozled, 1999, Spike Lee film. And I remember the late comedian Paul Mooney, his character in that movie said in one of his stand-up routines, like, everybody wants to be black, but don't nobody want to be black. That confuses me, right? And this is what the point is. It's like, okay, people will assume some of these attributes of blackness as long as they're still understood to be white. Almost like a costume you can put on or take off when you want to, right? There's certain attributes that black women have that it seems that white women would like to have themselves. So in this particular article today, a young woman, when people pulled up her social network profile, they accused her of blackfishing. People were asking, okay, is this girl really a white girl who's, participating in blackfishing to come across as black? Because over the last X amount of years, because of like affirmative action policies and this push in the media and in marketing to, I don't know, give more opportunities to the Afro-Brazilian population, you see that some white people want to jump on this bandwagon. There's already been this thing where, particularly in a state like Bahia, when there were laws passed that said campaign donations of black candidates had to get equal funding as white candidates. So you saw this phenomenon of a lot of politicians who had previously identified themselves as white suddenly changing their color classification as brown or even black. Okay. So as soon as there's something on the table, all these decades and centuries that blackness has been denigrated in Brazil, as soon as there's some benefits on the table, here you come people, jumping on the other side of the fence talking about they're black or brown. Okay. So that's what the controversy here. But when I looked at the story and I listened to what the young lady was saying and what other people were saying, and I looked at the pictures that they were talking about, I says, well, is it really that she's blackfishing because you thought she was a white girl based on pictures she had posted on her Instagram, in past profiles, past posts, and now you're seeing what she looks like right now, and you're accusing her of being blackfishing because she looked like a white girl back in the day, and now she looks like a black girl. But when I looked at all of the evidence, it seemed more to me like back in the day she was actually trying to pass for white. That's how I looked at it. Because in Brazil, you can actually, a person of mixed race, a person having African or Indian ancestry does not negate one from claiming a white identity in Brazil, different from the United States. In fact, I would say that the vast majority of Brazilians who consider themselves white, they have some admixture of either black people or, indigenous Brazilians. So, when I saw her pictures, I said, well, she doesn't look like a white. I'll say this: the whatever artificial practices she was using, she did look white in some of her pictures. But when you look at her without all of the I don't know, accessories, without all of the artificial procedures that she was doing, you look at her just as she is, and you can't really say that this is a white woman, right? She knows that, and everybody else knows that. So because of the flack that she was catching online, she felt like she had to post a video to explain what this was all about. And so I'm going to cover this today. I want to discuss this and just get an idea of what you guys think. So again, popular social network personality accused of blackfishing, but was she actually trying to pass? When I say pass for white, of course. Okay. So this is a woman that we're actually talking about. In one of her statements, she says, whoever is white has no doubt about it. Right. She says in her video, I have never been seen as white by white people. So the young lady's name is Rafaela Fleur. I think it's Fleur. And she said in a video in which she commented on the criticism of her appearance on social networks. This article here is by Eloisa Noronha. So I want to get directly into it because it is an intriguing story. I never get tired of these stories just by seeing how Brazilians are dealing with an issue that they long avoided. And people of mixed race who appear to be black, or you can look at them and see that they're of African ancestry. For decades, people avoid being defined as black. Then with the rise of black identity politics, people started accepting this blackness. And then as affirmative action policy started coming out, the Afro-Brazilian movement started dismissing some of these very same light-skinned mixed people as saying, look, no, you're not black or brown. You shouldn't have access to quotas because you don't look black enough. So it's always a question of which way Brazil, are you going towards just everybody's just mixed? Are mixed people who are of African ancestry accepted as black? For all those years, it took people to, accept a black identity. And then the more militant wing of the Afro-Brazilian movement says now, oh, no, you're not black enough. So, some people are in this type of racial limbo where they first reject being black, don't ever want to be associated with being black because of the stereotypes and the negative images of blackness. They come to accept a black identity, and then the black people themselves reject them as not being black. It is a confusing issue. That's why I never get tired of talking about this. But at first sight, what would you say? How would you see this woman here? Okay, that would be the question. Some people even asked when she recorded this video, like, why is the video so dark? Did she do that on purpose to make herself appear blacker? But as we go on, you see some of the pictures and you can make your own judgment. So this is her on the left, and this is her on the right. The transformation is pretty intriguing. So, model and fashion editor Rafaela Fleur released a video on her Instagram account on Monday, July 31st, commenting on the attack she suffered last week on social networks. Some profiles accuse the journalist of practicing the so-called blackfishing, which is the practice of white women adapting looks to imitate the appearance of Black women. How you can make a racial transition, says one of the prints posted by the Pop Omzi social network profile. So people were questioning, okay, well, they were making a point of, they posted a picture of her looking whiter and then how she looks now, or her natural appearance. And they say, look at how she does, so you can make this racial transition. Many internet users criticize the transformations in Rafaela's appearance over the years. So this is what they're saying. Okay, a lot of people call this, Afro convenience, people being Black when it's convenient for them. Okay. But is this what actually happened? Let's get into her story. So back in Brazil, after fulfilling her dream of making her first international trip, Rafaela recorded the video with a very depressed demeanor and was actually seen crying at times in the video, such as when she reported the practices she used in her adolescent years to look white in the photos. At the height of the attacks, some comments pointed to the possibility that Rafaela had, quote, pretended to be white in the past by straightening her hair. It's often said in Brazil that if you have fair skin, for men, if they have very fair skin, they can cut their hair to basically to the scalp to hide the curly hair and try to pass as white. Black women were always sold the idea that, okay, if you have very fair skin, if you straighten out the curls, then nobody will say anything to you and you can pass as white. It always, see, this is how it's a contradiction to me when Brazil says, the society says that you can have African or indigenous ancestry and still be accepted as white. But if that's the case, then why do people, if they straighten their hair or cut their hair to the closest possible on the scalp, if the skin is fair enough and it's not going to matter, why do people have to go through these extremes in order to try to be accepted as white? It's kind of a contradiction to me. So this is what the post from the Pop Onzi Twitter page was saying. Say, a Brazilian model is accused of pretending to be Black, be a Black woman. Okay. In Rafaela's video, she stated, I am from Salvador, and my family, or of my family, I am the lightest skinned person. For a long time, I thought it was lucky that my skin was a little lighter. During my childhood and early teenage years, I didn't do much about it. Until I was a little older, around the age of 16, I started to relate. I started going out. Now I'm saying when she started to relate, or she started getting into relationships, I started going out and around. That time I met my first boyfriend that was a Black man who liked red-haired white women. Okay. He said he liked the pale skin and such. It was then that I dyed my hair red, straightened my hair permanently, started going out with sunscreen, factor 70, so as not to take in any sun, obviously. So she's saying in order to not darken her skin, she said with a visibly shaken demeanor. So this is really funny to me because I remember some of the first people I met, one of the first families I met in the state of Bahia in Brazil's northeast. There was this dark-skinned Black woman. She was one of 5 siblings, 2 boys and 3 girls. And she was clearly Black. All of them were clearly Black, but her brother was a clearly brown guy. He saw his wife as being white. And I was just like, your wife is light-skinned, but she would never be considered white. That was just my viewpoint. Again, how people identify is one thing, but then how people classify them would be another thing. But we have to also remember that the way Brazil is divided, it's an enormous country. It's continentally, I think Brazil is slightly larger than the United States if you exclude Hawaii and Alaska, right? Enormous, enormous size of the country there. So one could be considered white in the northeast of the country and then catch a plane and go to the south of the country and be considered mixed or Black or brown. So this is how does race and color play out in Brazil. It's not always easy to be able to get how people see race there. Rafaela says that around the same
Aí eu
time she
comecei a
changed her way
sair
of
com o
dressing.
pessoal
She
lá
says,
por setembro.
Salvador is a very hot
Para mim
city
ter
and I go out
noção,
in my boots and my
Salvador é uma
coat
cidade
all
muito
assembled
quente
so as not to get sun.
e eu
And
saía de
also because I
bota,
thought I
de
was stylish,
casaco,
I like to dress that way, which
toda
made me a
montada
laughing
assim,
stock.
para não pegar sol.
In college,
E
people took
também
my photo and
porque
shared it with
eu
each other
queria
to
parecer
say that I was
estilosa,
ridiculous
gostava de
to
me
be
vestir
there in
daquele
those
jeito.
clothes, she said. So what she's
Porque
saying
também
here
eu
is that
serviu de
she would dress
chacota
in
na
clothes
faculdade, as
and in the
pessoas
heat,
tiravam
like people looking
foto
at you, why
comigo
are you
para
so
tirar
covered
o
up?
recibo,
And it was
falar
obvious
que
that as she was trying to give a more white appearance, she didn't want her skin getting darker in the sun. Okay. This is a more, it's a recent picture of her, I'm assuming. Again, I don't see anything that's white about her. She continues, I started to adapt several strategies for embranquecimento, which means whitening. A lot of people said that it was impossible to edit all the photos. It's not impossible, she said. Just take the photo, increase the brightness a lot, decrease saturation at night. Only take a photo with a flash blowing up in your face. Only take a photo by day in the light, she stated. So she's talking about all the ways that she would make her appearance whiter, different ways she can manipulate her photos. Rafaela explained how she made the photos with filters, manipulated videos to be accepted by some people, and have access to some environments. This is something that I've discussed much on the blog, where there are certain areas throughout Brazil where it is only expected that people with light or white skin, these people would frequent these areas, and these areas would be off, just out of sight for black or brown people. So she felt like being able to pass or be accepted as white, she would have access to these environments without people calling her out like, "You're black. What are you doing here?" People don't want to believe it, but this type of thing happens in Brazil all the time. Like several articles I have on this blog where it's just, oh my God, what is this black person doing on this airplane? You know, what is this black person doing driving that kind of car? This is the attitude. Some people go and knock on a house, and if a black woman opens the door, people automatically assume that she has to be the maid because there's no way a black person could have this type of house. So this is what she's saying. To be accepted in this environment, she wanted to be accepted as white. She dyed and straightened her hair and started using sunscreen to go out in the street. The journalist recalls that she used to use tooth whitening function and put it on her face, on her skin to get it very white. In the photos that went viral, my skin is porcelain in color that looking at me now, you can see that a person like me would never have in a natural way. So here's another picture of her. What do you guys think about this picture? If you saw this woman walking down the street, what would you see? Okay. So this is how she looked and manipulating her look, quite different from how she looks here. Continuing, let me see here. I adopted whitening strategies in the images, and I heard people say that I was more beautiful by the photo than in person. I didn't think I had to be whiter. I thought I had to be prettier. I put on green contact lenses that hurt my eyes. I was afraid that people would unravel me, said the communicator. So this is intriguing also because it's always been said that in Brazil, nobody has to pass because you can be of mixed ancestry in Brazil and still be considered white. So she was afraid that people would unravel or expose that she was trying to pass as white, which kind of contradicts the idea that people have to pass as white in Brazil. If she felt that way, if she felt that people would expose her secret, she's constantly looking over her shoulder to not be exposed. That's telling me people know that you're not white. So you have to go through all of this to make yourself appear white, right? The whitening strategy, she says. She didn't identify necessarily as saying she had to be whiter, but she had to attain a whiter look for her to accept herself as being prettier. A lot going on there. And she was always afraid that somebody was going to unravel me or unravel her or expose her secret. And it just sounds like somebody who's trying to pass. We know about these stories in, history in the United States where you have fair-skinned persons of African ancestry who will go to another part of the country where people would not discover the person's family and automatically blow their cover as they're trying to pass. So why would she have to go through all of this if people can accept a mixed person as being white? So clearly, and this is what I say, people always argue with me and say, well, you can't import these American ideas of race into Brazil. It doesn't work. But, and I agree with that to a certain extent. But the point is, why would she have to go through all of this to be accepted as white if people who are fairer skinned enough can be accepted as white? It clearly says that people know a person of light ancestry or a lighter appearance by their features and the texture of their hair. People will know, well, you're not absolutely white. You know, we might let you roll with us, but you know that you're not white. So it sounds to me like a huge contradiction. You know, the further I go in investigating Brazil, what I've come across over the years is that it seems that I'd say the majority of Brazilians know that people who consider themselves white just aren't quite white, you know, and then you get into this contest of who has whiter skin or whatever. And so the mixed person of African ancestry, they're going to have experiences in their lives where they look back and they understand how people made comments or jokes about them that showed that people didn't accept them as white. Okay. That I could go on and on with that. I mean, the comments that people have made, what people say on social media, this is very clear. The young woman also denied that she had undergone rhinoplasty, you know, or nose job, or that she had recently undergone artificial tanning. A lot of people said I must have cancer from tanning. I never did that, she said in tears. Rafaela also explained that the process of accepting her color is still ongoing, and to this day, it's painful. I didn't think the violence I suffered was racism, she said, citing as an example a teacher who referred to her as grimy. Grimy saying that, you know, you have fair skin, but because of the color, you're not white. You know, you have kind of like a dingy color. So people are telling her all along, and she's not getting it. She came to see herself as a Black woman when she moved to Sao Paulo. Now, this is intriguing also, because as I said, depending on what region you grow up in and you move to another region of the country, people will come into a Black identity because things might be a little bit different in Sao Paulo or, you know, in the south of the country where there are more people who have a more European appearance. And as you can see, a lot of people have talked about this over the years, whether they go into mostly white environments like the university setting, and they, after years not knowing they were Black or were perceived as Black, the way they get treated in these mostly white environments make them come into a Black identity, which is partially what she's saying here. She moved from, you know, Salvador Bahia, where lighter skinned people can be accepted as white, even being of African ancestry. And then she moves to Sao Paulo, where it's a little bit different, where most people in the Southeast and well, we'll say in Sao Paulo state, you have a lot of people who are clearly white, and they know a person who's not white when they see them. This, again, numerous stories I've heard about this. She continues, it was here that I started to access luxury, privileged spaces. And in these spaces, I started to hear some comments like, what a wonderful Black woman. Listen to what she's saying. So she wasn't always aware that she was Black at that time. And then she starts hearing in Sao Paulo, what a wonderful Black woman. In my head, it didn't make sense. In my head, I was sure I wasn't Black until a moment came when I started to question some things. And that's when I started my identity process. I heard a lot of people saying, wow, you're much prettier in the photo than in person. Wow, but you're so different in the photos. People are telling her, you know, in the pictures, you look like a white girl, but, you know, why do you look like this in person? You know, and these little subtle comments are starting to pop to her like, what are people saying? And hearing these constant, you know, these comments about how she looked in the photos after she went through all of this to make herself appear white, and then how she looks in person is starting to click that people don't see her as white. And this idea started to get very firmly in my head that I needed to be as beautiful in real life as I was in the pictures. Listen to what she's saying. I didn't think I wanted to be whiter. I thought I wanted to be more beautiful, more accepted, and I did everything to make that happen, she explained. In addition to making comparison between old images and new photos of the journalist on social networks, some internet users suggested that she would have gone Black suddenly to have access to job opportunities that were directed towards Black people. This goes into these affirmative action policies that you have in Brazil. It's almost like some people are saying it's like fashionable to be Black now. because the society is rolling out so many of these different benefits that excluded Black people for so many years in Brazilian society. As an adult, Rafaela Fleur says she decided to wear green contact lenses to help even more in this disguise. And this lens thing was very striking, she said, because it's something that hurt me physically. My eyes would water several times, they would turn red because it was a lens that I bought on the internet. It wasn't an ophthalmologist lens. I was ashamed of people finding out that I wore lenses. So when people found out, I said I used it because I needed to see better, she said. So she used filters and all type of other techniques to make her skin appear fairer. She would not go out in public without being covered up. She would wear green contact lenses. Obviously, she straightened her hair. All of this to be perceived as white. See what's going on here? It sounds to me like she's trying to pass. She continued, I was terrified of people unraveling me somehow. The same happened with photo and video. I was terrified of taking photos with a photographer, anything I didn't have control over my image that I couldn't play around with because I was afraid of being seen somehow. So there's so much going on here. She was afraid of taking pictures from a photographer because she would not be able to, manipulate the photos herself to give herself a whiter appearance. Rafaela recalls that despite all efforts to look more beautiful, as she classifies, she was always reminded that she was not white. This is a picture that a lot of people were, sharing on social networks where she looks whiter here, and then this is what she really looks like. Drastic difference, right? There were a lot of people saying whoever is Black really has no way to disguise themselves. Well, obviously, that's not true. And I agree that in the eyes of whites, there's no way to disguise ourselves, but we create mechanisms of belonging. It has been very difficult to hear things I have heard, but I hope that what happens to me will help us move forward in this debate, said the journalist. In another excerpt from her video, Rafaela is heard saying that when I was younger, or when she was younger, she suffered racism in high school. She continues, I heard from a teacher in the front of my whole class that my skin was grimy, as I said earlier, that I was not white or Black. When I moved to Sao Paulo, I already worked with fashion, but it was here that I started to access many luxury places, many privileged places. Let me see. I would go out with people to a bar, and then she would hear things like, wow, you look like this actress, or you look like that singer. And in my head, it didn't make sense. I couldn't understand why people were comparing me to Black people because in my head, I wasn't sure, or rather yet, she says, because in my head, I was sure I wasn't Black. Why are these people comparing her to Black people when she doesn't see herself as Black? So, again, this question of identity is starting to drop in her. It reminds me of the last season of Big Brother Brazil, where one of the girls who was participating on the show had never seen herself as Black until at that moment, the other Black participants in that particular edition of the reality series called her into a meeting in which all Black people were there. And it was at that moment that she was like, oh, I just became Black right now. So you hear something similar from what Rafaela is saying here. She didn't see herself as Black, but people are making comments that says she is, come hang out with us. We're talking about Black issues. Okay. Rafaela explains that despite having paraded in 2002 at the Sao Paulo Fashion Week, she is not a model. I'm not sure if that's supposed to be 2002 or 2022. I have to go back. There might be an error there. But even participating in, Sao Paulo Fashion Week and Fashion Rio are the two biggest fashion events in the country. But even participating in Sao Paulo Fashion Week, she is not a model, she says. She holds a degree in journalism from the Federal University of Bahia and has been working as a social influencer on Instagram since 2014. This is a picture of Rafaela as a child. Now, what's funny about this is when this whole controversy broke, I also saw a video online, and I have to go back and see who put this little video together, but it was a video of Rafaela, various pictures of her as a child. And people were just saying, it's clear that this is a little Black girl. Like, first of all, why are y'all trying to blast her for what you call blackfishing, being a white girl imitating a Black girl, when you can see her pictures as a child? This is clearly not a white girl. So this is what I ask. I'm like, to me, I don't see her as blackfishing. I see her as trying to pass for a certain, certain amount of time in her past. She also says that she only started to question and reflect on the subject when her Black friends started to include her in matters related to color. It was then that she stopped straightening her hair and using the green contact lenses. I started the process of identifying myself and started questioning several things. My father is Black, my mother is Black, my brothers are Black, but I am not, right? It's just that this is weird. I was entering a process that is happening to this day. It's not over. So she's talking about the development of a Black identity because it is such an intimate process and already so painful for me because I had to revisit a lot of things, revisit a lot of violence. When this violence happened to me, I didn't think it was racism. I thought it was something else. When this stuck in my head, I started studying, I started reading. It made me think that I already had this answer, she said. Having this answer didn't make me think that I would need to announce this, to have to explain or to have to delete an old photo and start a quote unquote new era. I needed to get through this in a particular way, she said. The journalist also recalled the comments she received on social networks. People saying that I would die of skin cancer because of artificial tanning, which I never did, that I should be beaten, that I should be embarrassed in the face. There were people who said that those who are Black know and that it's impossible to disguise themselves. I agree. It is difficult to disguise oneself in the eyes of whites, but we create mechanisms of belonging. We create mechanisms of whitening. And I had no idea what this was, what this reflection was, what this debate was before it really hit me. So you see, she's struggling with coming into this Black identity that society is pushing towards her. And it's only recently that she started to perceive this, not only by the comments that people were making, as if, first with the photos, like, you're much prettier in the photos, and in parentheses, like when you appear whiter, she shares these pictures where she looks whiter and then she shows up as her natural self and people are looking like, well, who are you? You should stick with this look in the picture because you look a lot prettier in those pictures. So she's starting to catch on to this. Why are people telling me I'm prettier when I look whiter? People inviting her to debates or debate issues that have to do with people of color or Black people. And it's, the coin is starting to drop, the light bulb is going off, as they would say. Despite the comments, Rafaela believes that what happened can serve in some way to advance this type of debate. She says, I'm not the first pessoa negra de pele clara, meaning light-skinned Black person, to perceive themselves as Black after many years. This does not exempt me from violence. Racism crosses me in other ways. I know I'm not going to go through what dark-skinned people go through. I think we will only be able to build a true dialogue if we humanize this conversation. If we stop fighting to see who is Blacker, who is less Black, whoever is white has no doubt. I've never been seen as white by white people, the young woman said. Okay. Again, she packed a lot in there. This point where she says she's not the only light-skinned Black person to only come to perceive themselves as Black after many years. The blog is full of stories like that. Let me see if I can find a couple. The question of becoming Black. People often talked about Neymar. When Neymar first became really a national figure, when he was like 18, he denied being Black. This guy wrote an open letter to Neymar because Neymar's confusion about his identity is symbolic of the struggle that a lot of persons of mixed race and even people who not necessarily have light skin who have a problem accepting a Black identity, almost white, almost Black. Then you have, again, this is the story I was talking about, people passing for Black. After new political campaign funding equality ruling, numerous white candidates become Black. Okay. Is there anything else in here? Okay, this woman here, Liliana, constructed her identity as a Black woman through studies. So this is something that you see in Brazil all the time. This question or this idea of becoming Black. A lot of people go through that. So what are the comments saying? What do people think about this whole situation? First comment says, she's a victim of racism. I'm not going to throw anything at her. Racism ruins everything, including our identity. It is cruel. The second comment, general commenting on it, but the child's photos show she is black brown, or you preto pardo, as they say in Portuguese. General commenting, but nobody went to look for the origin. The problem is not because she today has returned to assume her traits, but because she denied her blackness. It is always the fault of racism produced by whites. Know the origin before pointing the finger now. When it comes to saying that we are the majority in the country, including brown people, everyone agrees, but now they are more focused on making fun, memes, hate than seeing the root of the problems, which is white people or racism. Okay. A lot of likes for this particular comment here. Third comment. A couple of years ago, I was in this thing of self-declared black because in this racial limbo of being mixed race. Then as soon as I took the first card calling me white, I met the work, or I got to know the work of another Instagram profile known as Parditude. Whereas you got Negatude is talking about people and their blackness. Parditude, somebody on Instagram is pointing out these little subtleties and the difficulties of the person of mixed race, the brown Pardo, not having just total belonging in one side or the other. And so this is what this person is saying, found the work of this IG profile, Parditude. And there I understood that there is really no need to be begging for belonging in Wakanda or anywhere that they read me as white, because yes, I am partially white, partially black. As my phenotype is ambiguous, I have no defined race, or rather, I didn't have it. Today, I know that brown people, or pardos, are a racial group and not a subgroup of black people. And being multiracial, in my case, because I also have indigenous ancestry or family, it made me proud of who I am. People who are mixed race, like most Brazilians, also suffer racism and also encounter difficulties, obviously not compared to those who are dark skinned, but that is why we do not also suffer from not being read as white. The enemy should be different. So this person moved into blackness after years of being just considered Pardo or mixed, moved into blackness, and then she moved back into Pardo and seeing that as a completely separate category. Now, there's an ongoing discussion in Brazil today. Persons who are of the Afro-Brazilian militancy crowd, they want to lump all Pardos as black, where there's actually a Pardo movement in Brazil that says, no, we are completely separate from the black category. And as I've said, over the years, I've had to transition my own position on that, because I still will say there are millions of Pardos who would be considered black, who are by all intents and purposes are considered black. But then I would say the majority of Pardos are part of that racial limbo where you just really can't define them. So I partially agree with it, but I have to tweak it just a little bit, because there are a lot of Pardos. This woman is considered Parda, but you look at her features and her features are separated from being white or being Asian, for example, right? People looked at her video featuring her photos as a child, and people just see her as a light-skinned black girl. Okay. Anyway, I never get tired of reading these type of racial adventures, I'll call them. Just curious to know what you all thought about this. You look at how she looked in previous photos. You see how she looks, in her natural self. What did you think of this particular video? How do you see it? Do you see all people of whatever degree of African ancestry is black? Do you see them as being mixed? They should be completely separate. Do you see this woman as blackfishing, or do you see her as trying to pass? These are all the questions that came to my mind, and it's very clear to me, because of the association of beauty with being white, she tried to whiten her appearance when most people know that she doesn't look that way. She went through a lot of artificial techniques to make herself look white, and now she has adapted herself and accepted herself as, I don't know if she's moving into the black category or is still an identity in process, but just an incredible topic, incredible story. Just want to know what you all think about it. Consider dropping a comment in the comment section. Share this video, like this video, subscribe to the channel if you've seen more than a few videos that you liked. Click on the notification bell so that you are alerted when I put up a new video. And with that said, I'm going to end this video here and ask you to come and check out the next video.